intentionally killed her.
I don't feel no remorse for the death of them demons.
The way I was portrayed, mostly everything was lies. There was a little bit of truth, but mostly I was convicted off of lies.
These are the faces of women who committed some of the most shocking crimes in recent history. From stoic and unremorseful stares to complete emotional breakdowns, these women's response to their fate was as shocking as their crimes. So prepare yourselves as we reveal the chilling reactions of some of the most notorious female criminals. Let's begin at Wayne County Circuit Court, where Mitchell Blair is about to receive the ultimate punishment for her actions. 35-year-old Michelle Blair is facing charges of first-degree murder for the death of her daughter and felony murder for the death of her son. In 2015, an ordinary day in Detroit's Martin Park neighborhood turned into a nightmare. On a routine March morning, bailiffs arrived at Michelle Blair's townhouse for an eviction and made a shocking discovery. As they removed the furniture, a strong smell hinted at something sinister. Their search led them to a white freezer in the corner of the room. Opening it, they found the frozen remains of a child wrapped in a blanket. Further inspection revealed another child's body, similarly hidden. The victims were later identified as Blair's children, 13-year-old Stoney Blair and her 9-year-old brother, Stephen Berry. Mitchell Blair was arrested and taken to court. Throughout the hearings, Blair showed no remorse and boldly admitted to killing her children before the judge.
I intentionally killed her.
I don't feel no remorse for the death of them demons.
Keep in mind, these were her kids she was talking about. Throughout the trial, Blair maintained that she killed her children, Stephen and Stoney, after discovering they were sexually assaulting her youngest son. However, no evidence was ever found to support her accusations. During Blair's sentencing, Judge Dana Hathaway had a few words to say before passing her judgment.
The greatest tragedy here is that they will never know what a life is like without experiencing fearing their mother. They will never know the joy of what could have been in their life without having you in it. They lived in terrible fear of you. And I find that just so sad in this case.
With that, the judge handed down her sentence.
After all is said and done, you imposed the death penalty on your own children.
I did.
And you readily admit it, and you want to take responsibility of it. You're therefore sentenced to the Michigan Department of Corrections for the rest of your life without the possibility of parole, meaning, of course, that you will never get out.
While the sentence was being handed down, Mitchell Blair's face was stoic, showing absolutely no remorse. Mitchell Blair is currently in prison, where she will remain for the rest of her life. If Michelle Blair's reaction shocked you, brace yourselves for Taylor Schabusiness's reaction after a judge postponed her trial. In Green Bay, Wisconsin, Taylor Schabusiness appeared before a judge for a competency hearing to assess whether she could understand the court proceedings and assist in her defense. In February of 2022, 25-year-old Taylor Schabusiness was involved in a case that seemed ripped from a horror novel. Taylor and her lover, 24-year-old Shad Thirion, were together one night when their usual routine took a dark turn. After smoking meth, Taylor, in a fit of drug-induced rage, strangled Shad to death with a chain in the basement of his mother's house. However, the horror did not end there. In the hours that followed, authorities claimed that Taylor Schabusiness sexually abused Shad's lifeless body before proceeding to dismember him. Panicked and in shock, Schabusiness immediately contacted the authorities. Schabusiness was charged with first-degree intentional homicide, mutilating a corpse, and third-degree sexual assault. During the competency hearing, Judge Thomas Walsh presided, while attorney Quinn Jolly represented Schabusiness. An expert hired by the defense was expected to testify in the coming days, but Jolly stated that the doctor needed more time to complete his report.
Our doctor is requesting 2 additional weeks to finish preparation and evaluation of report.
Judge Walsh granted the motion, pushing back the start date of the trial to allow for a comprehensive assessment.
During the trial, and I'm looking at the week of May 15th for the trial.
And in that moment, Schabusiness jumped out of her chair and lunged at her attorney in a fit of uncontrolled anger. Watch it from this angle. The court officers sprang into action and restrained her. The deputies were able to remove her and place her in a holding cell. Once order was restored and the hearing reconvened, Jolly, who had remarkably sustained no injuries during the attack, requested to withdraw as Schabusiness's attorney.
At this point, I'm going to put a motion in the withdrawal from this matter.
Judge Walsh granted Jolly's motion to withdraw, and Schabusiness was assigned a new attorney from the State Public Defender's Office. Notably, she faced no additional charges for the attack on Jolly. Taylor Schabusiness was sentenced to life in prison without parole for killing and dismembering her boyfriend. Up next, we have a woman who conspired with her shooting instructor to kill her ex-husband. In a California court, Diana Lovejoy appeared before a judge for her verdict hearing. Lovejoy is being charged with conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder of her husband, Gray Mulvihill. Diana Lovejoy and Greg Mulvihill seemed destined for happiness, but 8 miscarriages left them heartbroken. Despite the joy of their son's birth, their marriage crumbled. Tension between the two began to escalate after a bitter divorce and custody battle. A judge ordered Diana to pay Greg $120,000 and share custody. Furious, Diana plotted a sinister scheme with her shooting instructor, Weldon McDavid Jr. Greg was ambushed and shot after a fake private investigator's call, but Greg didn't die. The failed assassination led to an investigation, revealing Diana as the mastermind. During Lovejoy's verdict hearing in court, the jury read out her verdict.
We, the jury, in the above entitled cause, find the defendant, Diana Jean Lovejoy, guilty.
Diana Lovejoy was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder of her estranged husband. Now watch Diana Lovejoy's reactions closely as the verdict is read.
In the Superior Court of the State of California, in and for the County of San Diego, the people of the State of California, plaintiff versus Weldon K. McDavid, defendant.
In a matter of seconds, Diana Lovejoy collapsed.
Guilty of the crime of conspiracy to commit murder.
The presiding judge, Sim von Kalinowski, then ordered the room to be cleared so Lovejoy could receive medical attention.
All right, we're going to need to take a break.
Diana Lovejoy lost consciousness and was taken to the hospital for treatment. Diana was sentenced to 26 years to life for her crime and is currently in jail. While Diana Lovejoy collapsed at the sound of her verdict, 31-year-old Crystal Candelario kept her straight face during her sentencing.
I'm going to sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
At Cuyahoga County Common Pleas Court, 31-year-old Crystal Candelario appeared before Judge Brendan J. Sheehan for her sentencing. Crystal Candelario faced charges of 1 count of aggravated murder and 1 count of endangering children. In the summer of 2022, Crystal Candelario left her 16-month-old daughter Jailyn alone in a playpen with a few bottles of milk while she went on a 10-day vacation. Candelario was in Puerto Rico with a male friend, enjoying the beach and later stopping in Detroit. In court, prosecutors revealed footage from a neighbor's doorbell camera capturing Jailyn's frequent screams.
Around 1:04 a.m. in the morning that you hear this child crying.
If you listen closely, you can actually hear Candelario's daughter crying. Let's play it again. When Crystal Candelario returned home, she discovered the lifeless body of her daughter. Jailyn had been trapped without food, water, or her mother's care. In a state of panic, she called 911. Candelario was immediately arrested and charged. During the sentencing hearing, the prosecution and the police laid out the harrowing details of the case, painting a picture of a mother who had forsaken her most sacred duty.
This baby loved her mother. She needed her mother. And her mother betrayed her.
Candelario was given a chance to speak during the hearing, addressing the court through an interpreter. She expressed remorse, asking for forgiveness from the society she had shocked and from the daughter she had lost.
I'm extremely hurt about everything that happened.
No estoy tratando de justificar mis actos.
I am not trying to justify my actions.
Pero nadie sabe cuánto yo estaba sufriendo.
But nobody knew how much I was suffering
y por lo que estaba pasando.
And what I was going through.
It was then time for the judge to hand down his sentence, but before he did, he had this to say.
The bond between a mother and a child is one of the most purest and most sacred bonds between human beings. Yet, in a shocking and betrayal of this fundamental trust, you committed the ultimate act of betrayal.
The judge then handed down the sentence.
You should spend the rest of your life in a cell without freedom. The only difference will be that prison will at least feed you.
Crystal Candelario is currently serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Up next, we have a woman who broke down in tears after being convicted of murder for shooting her boyfriend 6 times. In the Campbell County Circuit Court in Newport, Kentucky, Shane Hubers appeared for her verdict hearing. Hubers was charged with 1 count of murder after shooting her boyfriend 6 times because he was about to leave her for a Miss USA contestant. In 2011, 28-year-old Ryan Poston met Shayna Hubers, a psychology student at the University of Kentucky, through his step-cousin on Facebook. They hit it off and began dating, but their relationship relationship was marked by passionate reunions and tumultuous breakups over 18 months. By October 12, 2012, their relationship reached a breaking point. Ryan, 29-year-old at the time, had plans for a date with Miss Ohio USA 2012, Audrey Bolte, a meeting that would never happen. During the trial, Audrey Bolte testified for the prosecution, describing her interactions with Ryan in detail.
Asked for some help on a review of some movies that were going on at the time, and he had replied to one of them and left a funny, interesting comment.
How did he strike you?
Funny and smart.
Cut to the discovery of his plans with Audrey through Facebook messages ignited a rage of jealousy and desperation in Shayna.
I got up off the floor and I grabbed the gun and I shot him.
Shayna maintained that the incident was an act of self-defense. However, in the courtroom, the prosecution, led by Michelle Snodgrass, argued otherwise. They contended that Shayna's actions on that fateful October night were not self-defense, but the result of a relationship she couldn't bear to see end. They painted a picture of a premeditated act driven by jealousy and obsession.
So for 3 more times, she raises the gun and fires into Ryan Poston's twitching body until she fired the final shot where she knew it would kill him.
The defense, however, stood firm on the assertion that Shayna was a victim, not a perpetrator. They contended that she had acted in self-defense after enduring an abusive relationship with Ryan.
Degrading her own self-worth. I can't love you. No one can love you. You can't orgasm because you were touched as a child, and no one will ever love you.
However, the jury was swayed by the prosecution's argument and recommended a severe punishment of 40 years in prison. Hubers's legal team sought a new trial, arguing that evidence supporting her self-defense claim had been unfairly excluded. They also petitioned for her to be recognized as a victim of domestic violence, which could reduce her time served before parole eligibility. Despite these efforts, the jury still handed a guilty verdict. As the jury read the verdict, Shayna Hubers broke down in tears.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Shayna Hubers, guilty of murder under instruction number 5.
Hubers was sentenced to 40 years, with the possibility of parole after serving 20 years. While Shayna Hubers sobbed during her verdict hearing, convicted murderer Camille Gamet was caught smiling, showing no remorse at her sentencing. This behavior sent the judge into a fit of rage.
I agree with the family. I hope you die in prison as well.
At the Jackson County Circuit Court in Michigan, 31-year-old Camille Gamet appeared before Judge John McBain for her sentencing hearing. Camille Gamet faced murder charges for killing her 38-year-old boyfriend, Marcel Hill. Hill suffered 11 sharp force trauma wounds and additional injuries inflicted by various weapons, including a frying pan, a floor lamp, an end table, and a long knife. The incident occurred in May 2018, shattering the peace of a Michigan neighborhood. Hill was found dead in their apartment, his body showing signs of a violent struggle. As details emerged, it became clear this was no ordinary act of violence. Forensic evidence linked Gamet's DNA to the bloodied pan and knife, pinning her to the murder. However, throughout the trial, Gamet claimed she acted in self-defense and showed no remorse, even when the victim's family members addressed the court during the sentencing hearing.
I remember the cries of help that he screamed as you plunged that knife in and out of his body.
While the victim's family members spoke, Gamet rolled her eyes, smirked, and mouthed words. However, Judge John McBain would not tolerate her behavior.
And you're gonna shut your mouth or I'm gonna have some duct tape put on it.
But that didn't end it. Camille Gamet's nonchalant attitude only escalated as she addressed the court.
The way I was portrayed, mostly everything was lies. There was a little bit of truth, but mostly I was convicted off of lies.
Gamet's behavior only escalated the tension in court.
We have no choice but to send her where she will also die. I can't believe she stands before you doing this.
By the time the judgment was announced, tensions were already running high.
I agree with the family. I hope you die in prison as well. You know, if this was a death penalty state, you'd be getting the chair.
Camille Gamet was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Up next, we head to Memphis, Tennessee, where 19-year-old Shelby Isaac is appearing before the judge for a verdict hearing. Shelby Isaac is accused of first-degree murder for the deaths of Eddie Tate and his girlfriend, Edwina Thomas, who was 8 weeks pregnant at the time. The events unfolded nearly 2 years prior to the trial, rooted in a transaction that, on the surface, seemed mundane, a purchase of hair extensions valued at $250. Yet, this was no ordinary exchange. The prosecution painted a picture of a deal gone awry, alleging that Isaac work. Dissatisfied with her, a purchase arranged a second meeting with Tate under the guise of rectifying the situation. It was during this encounter that Shelby allegedly shot and killed Eddie and his pregnant girlfriend.
She took the time to extend her arm, pointed at these people, pointed in the direction of Edwin and Tom. And we know that she decided to pull the trigger at least 6 times.
The defense, however, challenged the narrative, pointing to a glaring absence of physical evidence linking Isaac to the crime.
When you follow the credible and unbiased evidence in this case, it does not lead you to Shelby Isaac.
The jury, tasked with determining Isaac's fate, deliberated over the evidence presented. After intense scrutiny, they reached a verdict that would seal the young woman's future. Judge James Lammy, who presided, read out the verdict.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of reckless homicide as included in count 3.
Upon hearing the verdict, Isaac's composure shattered, leading to a dramatic outburst in court. The 19-year-old collapsed to the floor. Isaac remained on the floor as deputies tried to revive her. Shelby Isaac was sentenced to 30 years in prison, with no possibility of release until 2040. If you thought Shelby Isaac was dramatic, brace yourself for Amanda Speduti's reaction during her sentencing. At the Guilford County Courthouse in North Carolina, Amanda Speduti appeared for her sentencing hearing. Speduti was charged with driving drunk and felony death by motor vehicle in a wreck that killed her friends in 2010. In 2010, 20-year-old Amanda Speduti and her friends, 18-year-old Sasha Adela Hoffman and Taylor Lee McCaskill, and 23-year-old Scott Wayne Bedwell, set off for a party after drinking at a friend's house. With a blood alcohol level of 20, more than twice the legal limit, Speduti lost control of the car. Speeding at 90 miles per hour in a 45 zone, she veered off the road, hitting a street sign and then a tree. The impact tore the car in half, and all 3 passengers were pronounced dead at the scene. During the sentencing hearing, the parents of the victims gave heartfelt testimonies. Scott Wayne Bedwell's father, staring directly at Amanda, delivered his with a heavy heart.
You can still talk to your mother, you can cry with your mother, and eventually you'll laugh with your mother. I cannot. I want to hug my boy.
Taylor McCaskill's grandmother also had some poignant words to share during the hearing, as McCaskill's parents wept in the courtroom.
My life has been changed forever, and Lord, I know you can't possibly need Taylor as much as her mother and I did.
Speduti broke down in tears during each of the testimonies. At some point during the hearing, Amanda Speduti emotionally addressed the court.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I suffer from it every day of my life. I'm so messed up. I suffer from this every single day of my life. I will for the rest of my life.
Amanda Speduti was sentenced to 7 to 12 years in prison for aggravated felony death by motor vehicle. Up next, we have 36-year-old attempted murderer Dinell Lane, who cut a baby from a stranger's womb. Yeah, you heard that right. In 2015, Dinell Lane, a former nurse aide, fabricated an elaborate lie, convincing everyone she was pregnant. She wore a fake pregnancy belly, doctored ultrasound images, and even held a baby shower. As her fictitious due date neared, the pressure to produce a baby grew unbearable, leading Lane to devise a sinister plan. Dinell Lane set up a fake Craigslist ad targeting pregnant mothers. On March 18, 2015, 26-year-old Michelle Wilkins responded to the ad and visited Lane. Once there, Lane attacked Michelle, brutally cutting her baby from her womb in an act of desperate violence. During the course of the trial, Michelle Wilkins described what had happened to her in court.
I remember she was trying so hard to choke me, then when she got closer, she just bore down with her whole weight on the heel of her hand over my windpipe. And I just remember everything going black.
Wilkins awoke to the horrifying realization of the violent act Lane had committed on her body.
And I tried to move, and I just felt this really intense pain in my stomach. And I looked down and, I just saw this really big cut across my stomach.
In the aftermath of the assault, Michelle's survival instincts kicked in. Despite her severe injuries, she managed to lock herself in a room and dial 911.
I kept asking for help because just staying present was really difficult at the time.
The call to 911 prompted a swift response from emergency services, who arrived quickly. They found Michelle in a state of shock, her abdomen brutally cut open, the life she was nurturing cruelly ripped away. As Michelle clung to life, the police began to piece together the events that had transpired. Dynel Lane, meanwhile, had arrived at the hospital with the deceased baby, claiming to have suffered a miscarriage. Lane was arrested and charged with attempted murder, unlawful termination of a pregnancy, and 4 counts of felony assault. During Dynel Lane's sentencing hearing, Michelle Wilkins delivered a heartfelt and emotional address to the court.
You embrace your narcissistic fantasy to fulfill the lie you created, and it was more important than my right to live and Aurora's right to live.
After Michelle Wilkins' statement, the judge was ready to hand down the sentence.
Ms. Lane planned this attack and left Ms. Wilkins to bleed out and die.
As the judge hands her sentence, Dynel Lane cries silently.
Ms. Lane is to be sentenced to a sentence the court finds, having considered the mitigating circumstances and the aggravating circumstances, that totals 100 years in the Department of Corrections.
Dynel Lane is currently serving her lengthy prison term. Finally, we head to the Cuyahoga County Common Pleas Court in Ohio, where 19-year-old Mackenzie Sharilla is appearing before Judge Nancy Margaret Russo for a verdict hearing. 19-year-old Mackenzie Sharilla faces severe charges: 4 counts of murder, 4 counts of felonious assault, and 2 counts of aggravated vehicular homicide for intentionally crashing her car into a brick wall at 100 Met PAH, killing her boyfriend and a friend. During Mackenzie Sharilla's murder trial, prosecutors argued that the 19-year-old had a toxic relationship with her boyfriend, 20-year-old Dominic Russo, and deliberately drove into the brick wall to end their relationship. Prosecutors also presented a video of the final seconds before the deadly crash as evidence. The footage showed her Camry accelerating down the street and careening into a building without any signs of slowing down. Watch the video closely as Mackenzie Sharilla drives her car at full speed. At the verdict hearing, Judge Nancy Margaret Russo had this to say before reading the final verdict.
The video clearly shows the purpose and intent of the defendant. She chose a course of death and destruction that day.
As the judge reads the final verdict, Sharilla reacts with complete shock.
This was not reckless driving. This was murder. Court renders the following verdicts. Count 1. Count 1.